Hey, everybody, welcome. We're going to be talking about big tech stocks. Oh, sorry, wrong show. Welcome. We're here with DisrupTV, here with our awesome producer, Elle. I've got my awesome co-host today, Diane. And of course, Vala is on vacation this week. And so we'll start by doing quick intros of our guests. We're going to reverse order. We'll start with Linda. We'll go to TJ and we'll go to Mark. Tell us quickly what you're talking about today. And more importantly, where you're calling in from. So Linda, go ahead.
I'm Linda Hill. I'm a professor at Harvard Business School and a partner at Paradox Strategies. I'm calling in from Brookline, Massachusetts. I'm going to be talking about how you build agile, innovative organizations.
Welcome. So, all right, TJ.
Hi, I'm TJ. I'm calling in from Singapore right now. I am CEO of AvePoint. I will be talking about digital transformation in the enterprise space and hybrid work.
All right, the world of hybrid work, it's super hot these days. Mark.
Yes, my name is Mark Rosekind. I'm the Chief Safety Innovation Officer at Zoox. We're a company building an autonomous mobility system, and we're going to be focusing on safety innovation designed and built into autonomous vehicles.
Well, that's awesome. We're going to kick off the show soon. I want to thank our sponsors, Robots and Pencils and IFS. You can follow them on Twitter at Robots and Pencils and at IFS. And more importantly, check out what they do. So with that, let's kick off the show.
All right. 3, 2, 1.
Very cool. Hey, welcome everybody to Disrupt TV. I'm Ray Wang with Constellation Research, and we're here with my co-host, Diane Hinchcliffe. Diane, as you know, is our vice president and principal analyst. He covers a lot of range of topics, anything from CXO issues, CIO, the chief digital officer. He's an expert in the future of work. He even coined the term Enterprise 2.0. But more importantly, he's an analyst here at Constellation Research, and he spends a lot of time working on some of the world's largest and most disruptive digital transformation projects, and he brings that expertise to our clients and of course to us on the team. So with that, we're going to jump in, and Diane, we're going to jump in and introduce our first guest, which is Mark Rosekind. So Mark is a safety professional with more than 30 years of experience promoting innovation through science and leadership in complex environments. This is everything from space to autonomous vehicles. He's a distinguished policy scholar in the Department of Health Policy and Management at Johns Hopkins. Go Blue Jays, Bloomberg School of Public Health. And prior to Zoox, he was actually appointed by President Obama to be the 15th administrator of NHTSA, National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, and serving from 2014 to 2017. He led a lot of transformation from proactive safety culture, both at the agency and automobile industry, to be future-oriented, really talking about what we're going to talk about next, really about autonomous vehicles. But more importantly, Dr. Rosekind, Mark, you've been I'd say a pillar in the safety world and a pillar in transportation and of course in innovation and science. So we want to welcome you here to our show today. And of course you can follow his company at Zoox. Welcome to the show, Mark.
It is my pleasure. And I can't reinforce enough how much it is great to talk about safety in this particular environment. So thanks for doing that.
Thanks. So Mark, welcome to the show. And it's interesting. You would think that automotive safety is not necessarily the sexiest topic, but what I found is really interesting is that we've gone from over the last 50 years where people used to buy their cars based on how they looked and how they performed. How fast did they go? And they used to hide cars in showrooms and unveil them, and that was the biggest feature. And now when you look at how people buy cars, safety is perhaps the largest discriminator, the key thing that people look for. They want to buy safety more than any other feature in their car. So can you walk us through a little bit about how we've gone from a reactive view of safety to a more proactive view?
Well, and I think, Dion, what you're highlighting is we are still in that transformation. And so I'm famous for this. I have to start 38,680 lives lost on U.S. roadways in 2020. That is 100 lives every day. Okay, 95% of all people that lose their lives in transportation, it happens on our roadways. And there are big questions like, how do we tolerate 100 lives a day? It should not cost your life to go to the store, to go to the doctor, right, to go to work, etc. It's just sort of amazing we accept that. And so to your question, that's really critical. For the last 100 years, safety in the auto industry has mostly been reactive. We just assume that people are going to get into crashes, and then we try and figure out, well, could we have done something better? Could we make the car more solid so they'd survive? Could we make the emergency response a little better so they could survive? What we're trying to move to, especially with new technology, is a proactive safety approach that basically says, can we prevent that crash from happening in the first place? Mm-hmm. That's real prevention. And then if you need to, at least at Zoox, we have this prevent and protect. Let's prevent it in the first place. If something does happen, then how do we use new technology to protect you even more than what currently exists? But what you're describing is the transformation that's going on right now in the autonomous vehicle and auto industry.
So proactive safety means not ever having the accident to begin with.
And there's some in this area who say our goal should be zero, that nobody loses their life. If you think about it morally and otherwise, really, that should be, like how many lives lost is sufficient? Well, zero. No one should lose their life. Now, that doesn't mean we may not have serious injuries or crashes, absolutely. But our goal could be and should be nobody loses their life on the roadways. That's real prevention.
It's a great point, right? And you're looking specifically at where autonomous vehicles work, right? There's a whole ethics issue behind it. There's the robo-taxi market that's behind that as well, right? We think about, where we are in the levels of autonomous vehicles, right? Where, like basic automation to human directed to machine intervention to fully autonomous to humans optional, typically 5 levels of AV that we typically talk about. Is there a different view on safety across those 5 areas as you think about safety in terms of we get to each one of those levels? And then of course, what does that mean going forward, right? In terms of the design, especially it all comes down to insurance, right? Who's liable for all this? Is it the manufacturer's fault? Is it the the network's fault? Is it you for getting into the car? So I thought we'd jump in there before we talk about your awesome safety reports.
Yeah, but actually, Ray, you just went to the heart of it right there. You just literally nailed it, okay? And there are 2 parts of it. The first part is what you were already saying, and that is there are 5 different levels, and at all the levels up through 3, the human has some responsibility to either monitor the environment or the vehicle, which means the driving task. And so the human is clearly involved, and I think that's where, as you were just pointing out, we're going to have a lot of questions, liability, legal responsibility, etc., is in all these levels where the human still has a role in the driving task. At levels 4 and 5, now we're talking about the vehicle is responsible for not only monitoring the environment, but also the driving task fully. And Alex Roy just came out with something he calls Roy's Razor, which is how do you know you're up at level 4 or 5, right? Where you get in the vehicle and sleep. Okay, so that's level 4, level 5. At Zoox, we went right to that. And again, to your question, there are a lot of people that say, and we know we have the data from NHTSA, 94% of crashes are related to a human choice or error. We make the choice to speed, to drive drunk, right? To do something that's going to cost a life on the roadway. And so people at level 4 and level 5 design are basically saying, let's get that human error out of the system. That's going to get us closer to that zero that we talked about earlier. And
so
I think
by removing human choice, we actually reduce that risk, is what you're saying right now.
Absolutely. And you've seen
the data. That's going to be a huge fundamental. That's a huge philosophical shift, right? Because I believe I'm going to do better than the machine. That's the bet I take every day.
So now you have us on another path, which is what's it going to take to trust the technology? Because we all think we're the best driver in the world.
Of course.
It's the other one. It's the other guy, the other person that's going to be the challenge. And yet the data are so clear. In fact, from the most recent past year, we actually have fewer miles on the road, more people.
Accidents.
That's more crashes happening. Speeding.
And seatbelts. You saw the seatbelt data, right? Wasn't that crazy?
It ends up in the United States today, 91% of people wear their seatbelts. In crashes where somebody dies, half the people are not wearing their seatbelts. That's a choice. Now, that doesn't cause a crash, but it could cause you losing your life, right? And I tell people, it's the simplest thing you can do for safety is just make sure you're wearing your seatbelt, whether that's in a car, an airplane, wherever it is. But yeah, it's just, you take some of those human decisions and choices out of the loop, and we have the potential for greater safety on our roads.
So, Mark, walk us through that, because if it's the human factors, if it's not putting on your seatbelt is causing so many fatalities, what kind of safety innovations are going to make that possible? I know that you guys have worked on a new safety report. and it has a whopping 100 new safety innovations. Will they make make us put on our seatbelt some way, or they do it for us? Can you walk us through your report and tell us about some of these safety innovations?
Yeah, thank you for that. Because starting with my title at Zoox is actually Chief Safety Innovation Officer.
Yep.
I'm the only one in the world with. In fact, when somebody says Chief Safety Officer, I correct them, and I say that because our emphasis is on exactly what you're talking about. How can and where can we do safety innovations, just like all the cool stuff that we're doing in technology innovations?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so specifically, we're one of the few companies that are building a vehicle from the ground up for autonomous mobility, thinking that if you retrofit, you're having to make a lot of compromises. And so we just finally revealed our vehicle in December of 2020, and now we get to finally talk publicly about some of these safety innovations that have been built in. So we have over 100. The report highlights 9, but Dion, let's start with the one you talked about, which is in our vehicle, we have sensors in the seat, in the buckle, and a camera that knows whether or not that belt is on the front or you're trying to cheat putting it behind you. And our vehicle will not start your ride until you're buckled in correctly.
This is the Highlander, right?
No, that's what I say. You got to go to Zoox.com because now we have a new vehicle. It's got carriage seating, so it's 2 people looking at 2 people. I apologize, but it's sort of like a green toaster when you look at it, but it's got sliding doors. Khalid just did a new normal video, and it's in that video in the first 45 seconds if you want to see it like in the real world. But go to the website because it's a totally new vehicle designed from the ground up so we can actually build these safety innovations into the vehicle design.
And it sounds like it's been built from ground up to be autonomous. So is that one of the reasons why you have people facing each other? Because now they can actually talk and engage and do things?
It's built for riders, not drivers. The cars you're in today are built for someone in that left seat to drive. So blank sheet, if you don't have a steering wheel and brake pedals, etc., how would you create? We're going retro, if you will, back to the carriage seating. So it's made for you, the rider, not the driver. And by the way, we'll go into it, I hope, even just for a moment, but the safety innovations range from preventive, like we were just talking. So there's greater driving control, such as being able to stop shorter and more precision steering. We're bidirectional, there's no front or back, up to no single point of failure, which means a lot of redundancy. And Dion, I have some freezing. Yep. Oh, you're back.
I'm back. I hope so. We lost Ray as well. I think we might have interrupted the stream. I think we're still live. And you dropped out for me too. But Mark, can you walk us through some of those? You had those 9 safety innovations out of 100. Were those the 9 most important ones you had, or can you blow our mind with some of the things that are in your car?
Yeah, we have independent braking and active air suspension, which basically gives us better traction with our wheels. And that means we have a shorter stopping distance. So obvious for safety, right? Which is you have more time to maneuver, and in a pinch, something happens, you can stop faster. We've got actually 4-wheel steering. Doesn't exist on cars today. And it means you have more control for power, speed, direction in each one of the wheels. That means we can literally have accuracy in our steering down to centimeters.
Wow.
Okay, it's not available today. And the other one, which I talk about getting your head around it, our vehicle is bidirectional. There is no front or back. Because it's symmetrical, when it pulls into a parking place, it pulls out going forward again. So that means no more U-turns, no more 3-point turns. And again, when you think about maneuvering in a city, huge right? You're no longer making that U-turn with cars coming at you, right? So bidirectional maneuverability in the city is just sort of mind-blowing. And then another category has to do with redundancy, where we've kind of got 2 or more of everything: powertrains, batteries, monitoring systems for all the safety elements within the vehicle. Like I say, we have over 100, but the 9 that are here are enough to, as you just said, blow your mind when you look at them.
Let me put that up there so people can see it, right? Up here on the upper right, you can see it, right? It is, yeah, there's no front or back. It's bidirectional. So very, very cool.
Yep.
So, but yeah, so, wow. So we're seeing these types of safeties and innovation capabilities here. This is a prototype. This is probably something that everybody else should be building on top. Do you see this as a platform in the future for people to use? Do you see it more than that as kind of an entire network that can be activated if everybody's using the same platform? Like, where's your vision? Where do you want to take this?
So first of all, thanks for bringing that up, because this is actually the vehicle that's going into public service in the coming years. And so when we're on public roads in a city, being a robotaxi, you're looking at the vehicle. Okay, so this is already built. It's being crash tested for public roads.
Wow.
And so what you're seeing is reality. It's not like a show car that doesn't drive. This is real, and it's on tracks and private roads already being tested, so we can, initiate it within a city.
So at our conference in Half Moon Bay at the Ritz, we could actually potentially demo this and have people check it out, right? That's
great.
So I mean,
you're
road ready, you're certified, right? You've got all the certifications behind this. So
it's not certified yet for public roads. That'll come in the next year as we get ready to actually start service in a city. But we're up to literally, and it goes, by the way, not just 25 in a city, but it can travel up to 75 miles per hour. So, it's already being tested on tracks and, like I say, crash tests, etc. But the final certification comes just before you can put it on the public road.
Okay, but you'll get commercial light duty AV testing. So.
Yep.
Exactly.
Got it.
And does the vehicle drive manually at all, or is it entirely automated?
It was built for autonomy. So there's no steering wheel, no brake pedals. It's for you, the rider. You get in on your own or with other folks, or a ride share if you want. But it is built for you.
Does it come with a pillow?
Is there a brake pedal? I mean, I guess the question a lot of people are going to have, because as you know, some of your competitors have what they call full self-driving, and they're getting closer and closer. But when that's on and there's accidents, that's getting an outsized visibility in the press, I think. And so, I was wondering, can you walk through for us what the general public needs to know about autonomous vehicle safety? I'm not sure everyone's 100% clear that it's probably a lot safer than what they're trying to do themselves.
Absolutely. And what a great question, because I always point out that the biggest thing coming is trust. And you were talking about it, Ray, earlier, right? Everybody, they're the best driver. Why would they give that up to somebody else or a machine? So there are three things that are going to build trust that people should look for. Data that literally show that what you're going to get into is safe. Okay. The second is transparency. You got to make sure you have access to that data, so it's proving that that vehicle is safe. And three is experience. And that's the biggest problem we have. As you were just saying, it's like we could bring a demo down to Half Moon Bay, but that's for a small group of people. When we start getting a lot of people having experience in cities, that's when they're going to be like, bring the pillow. I'm going to take my nap. I'm going to go on the tablet, right? It's just like no sweat. So it's going to take data so we know they're safe, transparency to that data, and then experience. You get in, and I got to tell you, every demo I've been in with people, in about 30 seconds, they forget that nobody's got their hands on the wheel.
Wow. Hey, we got some great questions from the audience here. I mean, one of them is it electric? From Leah. And I've got another question coming through as well. The question was really, Sarvjit says, we need a chief security innovation officer, which is on the software side. But what's interesting is it electric, and what are the implications for people who depend on driving to make a living? And then will we need insurers and underwriters anymore? I think that's the other question that just came in through here as well.
Yeah, so it's all electric. And that's why we're going after safety, sustainability, and a more enjoyable ride for you, the rider in congested cities. Okay. Are we going to need insurance? Yeah. One of the things I point out, you haven't asked the question, so let me preempt it. When are they coming? Okay. Well, they're going to be on the roads in the next year or two, but before anybody can go out to their corner and use their app to get it, that's 20 or 30 years globally. Right.
Wow.
And so to your point, even if Zoox were perfect, never have a crash, we're still going to be on the road with people hands on their wheels, those other 94% of crashes, right? The level 2, level 3, etc. So insurance is going to be around for a long time, just like cars or horses going to be around for a long time as we make this transition that'll probably be over 20 or 30 years.
Wow, this is very, very impressive. We're definitely seeing, a big revolution coming here, especially when we think about tier 2, tier 3 cities, the hub and spoke models, the exurbs, right? You're going to make the exurbs possible as that's happening. We're here with Mark Rosekind, Chief Safety Innovation Officer at Zoox, fellow Hopkins Bloomberg Blue Jay. Woohoo! Actually, if you didn't know, I got my MPH there. But anyways, thank you so much for being on the show. We definitely would love to catch you up at our event, October 25th through 28th. So hold that on your dates. It's something fun that we'd love to showcase, and we'll follow up with you afterwards. But thank you so much for being on here today.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
That is wild, Diane.
That is amazing. The whole world's about to change. I don't think people are ready for it.
I know. We're going from autonomous driving to autonomous remote work and software. We've got TJ Jiang here from AvePoint. Welcome to the show. Before we do that, I'll do a quick introduction, but he basically oversees product strategy and business development for AvePoint's global business and is one of the main architects guiding AvePoint's revolution and evolution to become a collaboration enabler. One of Diane's favorite topics, talking about what's happening as well. You've been a recipient of the E&Y Entrepreneur of the Year Award in New Jersey in 2010. And of course, more importantly, you are one of the pioneers in the software and technology sector in the DC and DMV area. So welcome to the show. Congratulations on a big event. So
Thank you, Ray. Thank you, Dion. Yeah, pleasure to be on the show.
Yeah, so TJ, congratulations on the public listing after journey. So I was wondering, kick things off for us, get our heads around about how AvePoint got started, the business problems you were solving for, what was the genesis, and give us some key insights about what happened.
Yeah, AvePoint began 20 years ago in a public library in New Jersey. I grew up in DC, Bethesda, Maryland, so that's why we talk about DMV a bit. My co-founder Kai and I started building a backup solution for Microsoft Exchange. We quickly turned our attention to SharePoint. That was a solid bet, given that SharePoint has become the backbone of Microsoft digital collaboration product as they continue to grow. So now today we're the largest SaaS data management solution provider for Microsoft 365 and count over 25% of the Fortune 500 as our customers. And we enable organizations to collaborate with confidence, whether that's protecting their data through governance and backup or help to migrate data from Slack to Teams, for example. We specialize in Microsoft ecosystem, but we're multi-cloud with capabilities for Google Workspace as well as Salesforce.
Got it. Whitman or Johnson or Montgomery? No, I'm just kidding.
Walt Whitman High School.
I see. Here we go.
Yeah.
But hey, but this is interesting, right? I mean, you've been in the middle of the world's biggest experiment in remote work. You've been at the front row seat. You've seen what's been going on. We're all debating. This is one of Diane's research coverage areas on the future of work. What's going to happen? And the question is what stays the same? What remains? I'm in conversations where people are we're going to get back to normal and we're gonna do whatever we were doing before. I want my 2-hour commute, right? Yeah. Other people are like, oh my God, I really enjoyed working from home. I didn't have to, deal with weird coworkers, right? I mean, there's the introvert, extrovert battle going on as well. So what do you think? I mean, put on your prognostication hat, design the future. Where do you see us right now? And where do we go in the future?
Yeah, so initially company had to move to cloud very, very quickly, right? Just to keep the lights on. It's by necessity. So in fact, actually, Microsoft CEO famously said, Satya Nadella famously mentioned that 2-year worth of digital transformation happened compressed down to 2 months, right? We've seen that happen. So, but even now, as we return to office, hybrid work is here to stay. For example, in their most recent Q4 most recent quarter, Microsoft earnings, they announced nearly 250 million monthly Teams users. Remember, they were just 20 million back in 2019. So it's a massive increase. And Gartner research also suggests that even as companies go back to offices, digital collaboration will increase. So companies will have to change the way they protect their data in order to exist in the digital age. So too many companies rush to the cloud without deploying proper governance. In fact, we actually also conducted a survey and research amongst our customer and find that 75% of companies deploy Microsoft Teams without proper governance or security policy in place, leaving them vulnerable to external threats. So at AvePoint, we offer collaboration security technology to help businesses swiftly execute backup, governance, apply specific policy insight with one SaaS platform.
So What's interesting is, we've been tracking organizations' a journey to the cloud for 10 years now. And, we see what the big cloud providers are doing in terms of, we call them hyperscalers now. They're enormous, but only like 15% of actual applications globally are out in the cloud. So we have a long journey yet, in another 5 years. And so, organizations are making that shift to the cloud, whether it's Teams or Office 365, which, we're seeing, Microsoft is getting so many enterprise-wide wins, which has to be a real boon to the business. But what are you guys seeing? They're making these big moves and they're leaving themselves exposed because they're in such a hurry to get there. But what's the catalyst that or catalysts actually, I think, that cause organizations to make that leap?
Well, I think there's been a cartoon that floats around, right? The biggest catalyst for digital transformation, it's a necessity, which is the COVID-19 pandemic. Mm-hmm. That's the biggest catalyst.
Last year, for sure.
Right, exactly. A lot of people were taking their time and be conservative about it, but now it's necessity over the last year and a half. So, but interestingly, many companies within regulated industry are still hesitant to shift. That's why AvePoint is FedRAMP certified, we're IRAP certified, ISO SOC 2, for example. And all of these certifications ensure that we're providing the utmost security to customers so they can feel confident, right, using SaaS technology to propel their digital transformation. So even of the companies who have shifted to cloud, many organizations are not leveraging their digital collaboration tool to the fullest. So up till last year, many were still just using video conference for chats, but would lock down Teams workspace creation and lose out all the rich contextual file collaboration. It was practically the equivalent of having a Ferrari with a Corolla engine, right? We were just talking about cars. So now that Microsoft provides more governance tools, and of course, external vendor like AvePoint exists to supplement their native offerings, organization can better manage Teams and Office 365. So it's all about optimizing customer use by tailoring controls, templates, governance for different departments, and manage external sharing and guest users. So as I mentioned before, shifting to cloud is one piece of the puzzle. So now companies really need to ensure that digital collaboration is productive, compliant, and also secure.
Well, and the data is moved outside the organization. This is what's happening is organizations that go to the cloud saying, well, now my most valuable asset, my single most valuable thing that I have, I'm pulling it out of my company. I'm going to put it out there on Microsoft or some of the other clouds out there. And do you give them that safety net to really, so they feel completely confident in making that move? Is that really the value add here for you guys?
Yeah, it's the safety net. There's governance controls to make sure how people are sharing. And also, very importantly, Gartner's been talking about this for a long time. Even if you go with the big cloud platform providers, the Google, the Microsoft, AWS of the world, you have to also think about having segregated and secure SaaS backup restore solutions. Now we see ransomware attack almost every other week. Even White House came out to say, hey, the best way to recover from a ransomware attack is a segregated backup solution so you can recover your data, because otherwise, if it's within the same platform, the corruption would just spread right across within that same environment. So yeah, we've seen this, it's been a long time coming. It's continuous education, but obviously now it's top of mind for every businesses.
Yeah, we're definitely seeing this shift. And one of the interesting things is, the cybersecurity ransomware issue has got everybody much more focused, on what's important. And we're seeing, this whole notion of, the need for cloud engineers, cybersecurity engineers, remote, collaboration kind of, engineers, security systems, right? And people can't manage that on their own. And that's the beauty of actually being able to do it in one centralized governance model, which you guys do well. One of the industries that's definitely, needing a lot of this has been higher education. They've been the most ransacked in terms of, the impact of what they've been doing. You guys have been really passionate about this. What's changed for higher ed? You guys spend a lot of time talking about it. And what is happening in the industry?
Ray, I think this is, everyone's been talking about this is the golden age of education technology. What's changed in higher ed has been the biggest change in the last 100 years, especially, college or universities that have not changed the way they go about teaching are now forced to change, right? So one of the reasons I'm very passionate about higher ed is, I love my experience, education experience. I actually have a doctorate in data mining, machine learning. And during that period, I was also teaching at the same time. So I love teaching as well. So I think the education is an industry that needs significant digital transformation change. And as we see, the amount of venture capital that's raised in education space in the last year and a half is unseen for decades. So the pandemic showed that the digital learning experience has been really neglected. Sure, learning management system has been around for a while, but the legacy vendors have created asynchronous communication systems for students. There's no cohesiveness to it. For example, students may attend a class via Zoom call, but take a test via digital proctoring solution and then talk about it over WhatsApp. That's very, very confusing. So Microsoft Teams can host all these activities, and this is where our EduTech solution, what called Curricula does. It doesn't just surface a tab in the Teams, but also, it uses the Teams architecture to enable all the digital learning and collaboration among peers and professors online, either remote learning when it's necessary or enrich the classroom. So we actually stitch it all together. The other challenge is anti-cheat, right? We built a solution, Examina, that integrates with Teams, but also have sophisticated AI and anti-cheat measures. So we actually build this for institutions here in Singapore. And Singapore in APAC region and globally, it's an education hub, have great reputation. And they're leaning forward to look at how technology can enable this hybrid learning and flipped classroom learning to make it the learning experience richer despite the pandemic.
Yeah, it's been really interesting to watch. Microsoft Teams has become a candidate for where the center of work is going, because it has so many deep integrations with so many of your other work systems that you can host files and conversations and hold meetings and do all of the collaboration. I did a survey of our digital workplace advisory group. This is 50 of the top digital workplace teams in the world. We did at the beginning of this year. And we asked them just on a whim, how many of you are going to standardize on Microsoft Teams for all collaboration? And I didn't expect a very high number. But 31% came back and said that they're going to do that. And so that's really remarkable. It's interesting that we're seeing education. You guys are doing the exact same thing with education, bringing all the pieces together, saying we now have a center of gravity, a natural place to put that. And right. I think that where do you think Teams is going to go? Is it really going to eat the world like that? It seems like it's becoming the de facto tool.
Teams is definitely the new killer app, right? If you think about it, it's Slack plus Zoom plus Box and Dropbox all in one, right? Plus, of course, full integration, native integration with Microsoft Office, which is still the collaboration tool of choice. The only thing that come close to it is, but distant second, it's Google Workplace, right? Mm-hmm. So there's this integrated offering now with Windows 365, which Microsoft just announced, where they're streaming essentially Windows OS from the cloud. Every instance will have Teams baked in. So this is how you see now all of a sudden 250 million monthly active Teams users, just from 140 million like a few months ago they announced that number. So Teams is going to be pervasive. It's going to be in every single instance of Windows OS out there. And the fact that it's so natively integrated, and I think Microsoft is very, very smart about this, right? Making their software available on iOS, Android devices, and everything then becomes a pipe back to Microsoft Cloud. And that's actually, a very, very good strategy.
Yeah, no, this is definitely one of the things, right? We're building that signal intelligence. You're building the business graph that actually helps people over time, right? All that information, all that connectivity between a stakeholder, whether you're a supplier, a customer, partner, employee, with an object, right? An order or an invoice or an incident, right? That we have attribution, right? In the digital world. I mean, you know exactly what's going to happen. You can learn from that. You can build patterns. You can start building, neural nets on the back end to understand like where you can start getting to automation opportunities. So right. Definitely some interesting stuff going on in that space. Let's talk a little bit more about what's next. What's next for AvePoint? Like, what do you guys want to do? Where do you guys want to take, the organization? What's hot? What are some areas that you're exploring? That you see are, opportunities, right, in the future of work. So.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of exciting things for us. And now that we're public, we can do things at scale. Our major focus is obviously making sure that we can protect the data and connectivity for businesses and obviously for education. So there's vertical solutions we're looking at, continue to build on top of Microsoft Cloud. There's obviously expansion into channel. We announced a major global channel program where we introduce partner DevOps. So that means partner can build their unique IP on top of our cloud ecosystem, cloud platform, and on top of Microsoft as well, to then offer this managed services unique offering to businesses. And so there's that expansion. And also as well, now in this anti-globalization climate, every country wants their own cloud. Right, it's kind of like a misnomer. But you see that Microsoft's dropping data centers, quote unquote, in-country cloud everywhere, and whenever that happens, we see our business grow. So this happened, for example, in South Korea. It's happening in UAE. So truly, there's this global footprint is ever expanding. So there's tremendous amount of opportunities around this whole concept of digital collaboration and work. And then there's vertical solutions like education for us to expand into.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring up anti-globalization. One of the big trends I'm seeing is these new collaboration vendors that are getting a footprint because they're not based in the United States, and there's this. There is this fragmenting of the cloud space that's happening. Everything from data residency and all the rules with GDPR, and this is creating some drag on organizations' cloud plans. Given your vantage point in the industry and working with one of the very biggest cloud vendors in so many organizations, how do you see that progressing? How are we going to keep the cloud as appealing as it is today? It used to be one place to keep our data and one place to run everything, and now it's getting more complicated. So what are organizations going to do, and how does organizations like AvePoint help with that?
Yeah, I think regulation, it's just a reality of things. But this is where software can come in with automation, that you can achieve this data sovereignty, data privacy in flight, right? One of the analogy we talk about, for example, data privacy. One of my good friends is head of IAPP, International Association Privacy Professional. Yeah, Trevor Hughes. And he had a good analogy. So when cars first came out, Henry Ford's Model T, it's traveled very slowly, but still people get hurt quite a bit, right? Because and over the next decades or so, we have brakes, we will have better brakes, better airbags, seatbelt. Now we have fully autonomous vehicles. Actually, cars can go much, much faster, but safer. So just because you're introducing regulations and requirements doesn't necessarily mean that companies are working slower or sharing, slower. So this is where technology comes in, and this is where we actually make our business to automate all the governance and controls so that enterprises, as they now collaborate in cloud, in hybrid format, or cross countries, they have this seamless way to share and what's allowed to be shared and be able to still operate at the speed of their business. So these are very, very important things that folks now to start to recognize, that there is a lot of nuances to cloud. Cloud is not just one place where everything just happens naturally. There's still a lot of challenges that come with it, and this is where AvePoint can help.
Great point. I mean, look, can you believe it? The cloud's been around since 1999. It's 21 years, and we barely got 20% of the world's workloads there. That's ridiculous, right? It's the slowest adoption of any kind of disruptive technology we've seen in a while. But hey, I want to switch course real quick and talk about your company and the sense that you built a startup not in Silicon Valley, not in the normal place. I think you're headquartered, Jersey City, actually?
Yes,
I mean, it's an unusual place for, in today's times. Talk about, recruiting, what's it like? What's the tech scene for you, right? And, how you're getting talent, like what that talent pipeline looks like. And more importantly, what is that startup community looking like where you are?
Well, I mean, New York actually has a pretty vibrant startup community, right? There's Digital Alley in Manhattan. So I think right now it's really, there's talents everywhere. Amazon talked about moving, have a location in New York, but then they scrapped that and moved to DMZ, right? Where I grew up, and we actually have our public sector headquarters in Arlington, Virginia. Of course, the biggest buyer in the world, which is United States government's headquarters there. So a lot of tech giants have position there. But I think overall, I mean, the tech scene, the talent has been large enough to be able to kind of accommodate these big players. But there's also opportunity for emerging players like us, now we're public, to attract talent. The flexibility is key. Ability to create community is key. So, for example, we have a diversity and inclusion community called IDEA that have regular forums for Black excellence, LGBT community, and allyship community that actually meet regularly. I think it's not just about technology, but it's also this sense of empowerment that people today don't just need a job to live. They actually want a job that's fulfilling for them, so that they can feel that they bring a difference to this world. So I think that's very, very important for company to continue to attract talent, especially now with hybrid work. People really can work anywhere. It doesn't really matter where they are. And we always living on the bleeding edge. We use technology for all of our work. I mean, I'm, at any one point, I'll be anywhere around the world, but I still have connectivity tissues to 14 countries to our workforce. So it's really that allow us to attract talent globally.
Wow, that's wonderful. We are here with TJ Jiang. He is the CEO of AvePoint. You can follow AvePoint, AVPT_TJ. They just went public. Congratulations. Thank you so much for being on the show, sharing your insights on remote work, and of course, being here today, this Friday. So
thank you, Ray. Thank you, Dion.
Wow, Diane, we've gone from autonomous enterprises to autonomous vehicles to what do we got next here? This is going to be even more interesting in terms of what we're thinking about in terms of the world innovation and how people work. So we've got Linda Hill here, co-founder of Paradox Strategies, Harvard Business School professor. She is the Wallace Brett Donham Professor of Business Administration at HBS and chair of the Leadership Initiative. And of course, one of the top experts in the world on leadership, a Thinkers 50. It's one of the top 10 management thinkers in the world in 2013. And of course, an Innovation Award in 2015 as well. And you've written a number of books, from The Collective Genius, Being the Boss, Imperatives of Becoming a Great Leader, but usually using your expertise in research, ethnography, leadership, and management, pulling all this stuff together. You've got a massive bio, so I'm not going to read it all here, but more importantly, I really want to thank you for being here, because we've got some awesome topics to get to, and I don't want to miss any of them in this period of time that we've got here. So I'll pass on the first question to Diane. Go ahead.
First, Linda, welcome. Thanks for being on the show. And so, Ray and I have talked to hundreds of CIOs and other C-level executives since the pandemic began, trying to get in their head about what are they grappling with, what are they facing, what are the challenges that they have to overcome. But I think you've probably got an even better handle on that. I was wondering if you walk the audience through, what are today's leaders worried about right now as a result of the pandemic? Can you give us a sense of what's on their minds and what they're facing?
Yes, I'd be happy to, and it's really a pleasure to be here. I very much enjoyed the first two segments and all the kinds of interesting innovations that are happening. So just want to put this into context. So I study the connection between leadership and innovation, and how do leaders need to behave if, in fact, they want to build organizations that can innovate time and again. So I was doing a series of studies, as I'm always doing, because I'm an organizational anthropologist. And last March, when I started calling leaders and saying, what's on your minds? What one of the leaders said to me is, you know what, Linda, this is like leading through a fog. Leading through a fog. And what does it mean to lead when you can't see and you have no vision? And this whole issue of tying leadership to vision, and when you can't see, and when you actually begin to understand how unpredictable the world is going to be, they're all struggling with, what does that mean my role is? And this one leader said to me, you know what? I thought I needed to figure out how to take charge and steer the ship, but when you can't see, you don't, what's the steering business? And instead, I need to figure out, how do I hyper empower my people to convince them that there is no such thing as business as usual? We all need to be agile. We all need to be innovative problem solvers. And as he said, this is a very different way for me to think, because what they're focused on is, guess what? We really do need to be agile. And I cannot do it by myself. Now, many leaders already knew that, but they really, really feel it because they can't predict what's going to happen. The second thing they're worried about is really the safety and the well-being of their people. Deep concern about the physical and psychological well-being of their people. And what are the right choices to make? Should you bring them back to work? Should you stay hybrid? What really does make sense? And then the third thing I think they're really quite worried about is, indeed, particularly in the US, about inclusion. How do we build environments that are more inclusive? Because the expectation now, they've made promises. George Floyd happened. Many stood up, made all these promises, and now people are watching to see if they're going to deliver. So I'd say agility, the well-being of their people, and how do we deliver on what we said we're going to do with regard to inclusion?
Yeah, no, these are great points. And one of the things is leadership styles are also changing and leadership requirements are also changing and evolving. And so in terms of prioritizing efforts to be competitive or stay competitive, where are you seeing, some of those efforts focus on? And really also what impacts from the board, right? Have boards really look at things differently as well?
Yeah, it's funny. I've actually been on 4 public boards. And so one of the things I wrote about a little while ago was boards and innovation, but I've actually been asked to speak to more boards about that. How do they pay attention to and make sure they're friendly, if you will, to innovation? I'd say
Right.
what's happening with leadership at the moment is, if in fact it's not so much about vision, of course vision matters. If you have clarity, tell people and let them go that way. But moving from a followership model of leadership to more of a co-creation model of leadership, really fundamental shift
Yeah.
in mindset. And they all get it. And as one leader said to me, I sort of have been trained, when I see blood, I stick my finger in it and stop the bleeding. That's exactly the wrong behavior. So I literally see leaders, C-suite leaders, getting coaches to help them look at their language. How often do they ask questions versus make statements, et cetera? So part of it is, what I see is, and they're a little fearful about it, is looking at themselves and thinking about, I need to figure out how I'm going to be different if I truly want my organization to be different. Even take one of the issues that was described earlier, trust and transparency, the kind of transparency that is being expected of leaders today, and they can't help it anyway because of social media, et cetera. Many of them, how do I cope with that? Anything I say can be public within seconds. And I am feeling, and I think I'm going to go to the personal part, they're feeling fairly vulnerable about all of this, because my rhetoric matters, my behavior matters, and people are there's a higher standard here. And guess what? This is an unbelievably challenging time. And the last thing I want to say about the challenging time, because I really do feel so much respect, and I feel for the challenges that people face. I was doing some work with leaders at the United Nations, and they said that leaders in the United Nations are used to being concerned about their own safety, given the nature of their work, but they're not used to being concerned about the safety of their families. At the same time, their families are usually elsewhere. But now what you see is, I got to work through all of this, and I got to do it really worrying not only about my health, but my family's health. And that's real personal. So I see, on the one hand, going back to priorities, this is about competitiveness, because if you have a leader who cannot take care of him or herself, they're not going to be able to run the organization very well.
Exactly.
So you see that side of it. And then on the other part, though, it really is about how do we become more agile, which is really about culture. So, it's interesting to me, just how many articles do you read day in, day out about culture, culture, and how do you create the right culture?
Exactly.
Yeah, well, it often comes from the top, but you make some great points. And, as we hopefully come out of the pandemic, we know that we still have some more events in that regard coming down the pike. If you're a leader, and I've been working on things like post-pandemic playbooks for the CIO, right? That's the audience that we work with primarily, and saying, well, you need to have set-asides for more unexpected events in the future. We know that our business continuity plans were never adequate enough. Almost nobody's came back and said we had a business continuity plan for a global pandemic that was really effective. Right? No one's saying that.
Right.
So how, we seem to be facing an era where we just have more disruption, change, and uncertainty than we've ever had before. And some of it is good and some of it is not good. And we have, cybersecurity incidents and ransomware. There's all these unexpected events that create that fog that you were talking about, Linda. What can leaders do to position their organization? How should they be thinking? I mean, you've talked about being agile, but and maybe shifting and creating a new culture, much more around nurturing and safety. What else can organizations or leaders do to prepare for this level of uncertainty?
Yeah. So first of all, I want to say that when we look at leaders who are really good at this, they're described as being the most demanding leader that a person has ever had and the most generous. So there's nothing, I just want to be clear, they're quite demanding. So what we know about the culture, we know a lot about what kind of culture you need to be put in place if you want to have an agile organization. One piece of that is you all have to have a sense of shared purpose. Because when you don't really, quote, know the direction you're going in, purpose is really what pulls us all together. If we have a sense of who we are and why we're together, that is what we align around. That's how we align our intentions and our actions. So for sure, what you see is that people are really looking to their leaders to help the work seem meaningful, because you know what? When you have to innovate, when you have to be adaptive, it's emotionally and intellectually very taxing. So I do a ton of work with people who are in the technology fields because it's one of my loves, and I write with people in that field a lot. And one of the things I help try to have them think about is, how do they build the kind of network of relationships they need to lead in their organization? So let me back up and say, so what leaders are thinking about is, how do I develop leaders, people in my organization, not just the leaders, CIOs in particular, maybe, or the people who are helping with digital transformation, because technology is an important enabler of agility, very important. How do I build CIOs and other leaders in the tech space who know how to partner effectively? I hate to put it this way, with their partners in the quote business space. I tend not to think of things quite that way. So one thing that we know is that the way that most people think about leadership, when you ask them what is leading, they look down and they think about the people who report to them. Leadership is as much about managing the network of relationships. Most of leadership these days that really matters is really exercising influence over those over whom you have no formal authority. Exactly. But most people don't think about that as being about leadership. They think that's sort of the politics of organizational life. Well, the real action happens on that horizontal work. And that is something that's desperately suffering right now with all of these different kinds of technologies. It turns out we're all burned. We might meet with our own team, our own line, but we're not necessarily doing the horizontal work. So all the programs that I run for people who are sort of in the tech space are often about seeing that piece, that horizontal piece, and how do you do that, both with people inside and outside. So one thing that's really critical to have an agile organization is to have people think about, if you will, that network of relationships and building out the ecosystem they need to be effective. That's a different mindset about what leadership is.
Yeah, ecosystem.
Yeah, no, definitely agree with that. And as you've been doing this, you've been holding a lot of meetings and little roundtables with folks around the world, with leaders, talking about what's next. And you've definitely, I mean, I think every guest here has talked about the acceleration of digital transformation by the pandemic and what's been going on. What I really want to know is, what are the key findings from the roundtables? Is there geographical differences? Is there any kind of significant by industries, like people are looking at it differently, and well, tie into your ethnographer roots, other longitudinal patterns that we're missing here that we might not have seen. So,
and I should tell you, we've also done some survey work to be supportive of the roundtables. So I would say there are some regional differences that we're beginning to see, and actually it looks like Asia is ahead of the West, mostly because more of Asia is mobile already, right? Mm-hmm. They've already moved from the internet to the mobile phone, right? So fundamentally, what we see is they seem to be ahead in that regard. So because that's where it's all going. So I would say that's one regional difference we see. The other thing that is interesting to see, and we've looked at, obviously Asia's huge. So when you talk to the Japanese executives versus the Southeast Asian versus the ones in mainland China, one of the things that they all do recognize is most leaders, and this may be even more true even in the West, are not digital natives. They're older. And so there's a generation there that, frankly, is not all that comfortable, and they don't think and see like digital natives. So we see some interesting sorts of reverse mentoring happening. One China company, they have a 22-year-old who sits on the C-suite with them to just have them think about things. Another leader in Abu Dhabi, because he wanted to make sure they did things differently and broke frame, put young people on the committees so that they would ask those so-called, stupid questions that the person with the beginner's eye asks because they've never seen an epidemic or whatever. So I see one thing that's happening as a result of digital is that they're understanding, a lot of the leaders, that, you know what, I don't really get all of this or know all of this, so how do I get exposed to it? So you see them understanding why they need to collaborate with or go down into the organization and get people who are younger. So lots of talk that digital transformation, how do you use all the talent of all the different generations you actually have? Because it's not you're not going to turn it over to the digital natives, but you got to figure out how to collaborate with them. The other thing, the main thing that really surprised me, frankly, was they don't, and this may be, and some of the people we've studied are in the digital roles or the tech roles or whatever it is. It turns out that what's really hard is not the technical choices. It's actually getting people to work differently and in fact, utilize the data and utilize the digital tools. So when you think about data, that is about power, because information is power. So when you tell someone who's very experienced, now, use the data, it's like, wait a minute, what does my experience count for? What's going on here? How about my expertise? So we find that in organizations that really say we're going to be data informed in our decision making, not data driven, they get less resistance. Because again, you have to think about the implementation of all of this and how people will experience it. The other thing we're seeing, and I wouldn't surprise you all, is if you provide visual tools to help people be able to look at patterns with data so that you even the playing field so they don't have to simply deal with the digital people who know how to read the stuff, again, you get more embracing of the technology. So what we've been focusing on is not so much the digital strategy, which is very important and all that, but what they tell us is hard is implementing it, getting people to actually use the stuff, right? And you've invested millions and they're not using it. So how do you help them learn how to work in new ways to use those data? That's what the main message I would say has been. And then again, as I said, there really are these differences in the parts of the world about how far ahead and what are the actual specific kinds of things they're trying to get done.
Yeah, execution is the hard part with things like analytics. You can get swamped with data, and you don't have any way to action it quickly enough. But Linda, I love what you were saying about with leaders trying to get more tech savvy and getting more involved with the younger people in their organization. And I've seen just that same thing happening in Europe, especially where they're not very tech savvy, European corporate leadership. But organizations like Bayer have been, the big pharmaceutical company, have been creating reverse mentoring programs where they bring the young up and comers in the organization and they spend time with the CEO and even the whole board, and they show them the TikTok videos that they're watching and how to use Twitch and giving them a completely different mindset, and it's really accelerating their digital transformation efforts. So I totally agree with what you're saying there. There's a two-way flow of information that needs to happen for these types of things. Yeah. But getting back to some of the things you were saying around agility and culture, those are things that we have to have, or things that we have to do. But increasingly, it really seems like there's much more of a focus on driving those things towards a purpose, towards purpose-driven leadership, a mission orientation. Can you walk us through why that is becoming talked about so much more recently?
Yeah, as one piece of it, as I said before, is I think, well, there are a number of reasons. One is it turns out that when we studied innovation and when we wrote a book called Collective Genius, and the whole point of Collective Genius is that really is about a collective activity. Most innovation is the result of people collaborating who have different points of view and different expertise. And you're going to have to take risks as you all know, discovery-driven learning. It turns out that all of that is hard to do emotionally and intellectually, particularly when you're trying to do breakthrough work. So why do you bother? Why should I take these risks? As one leader said to me, we have no fail-fast career here in my company, but they want me to take that risk. Well, I'm only going to take that risk if the work is meaningful, if the purpose and the impact we're going to have is truly going to make a difference in the lives of people that I care about. So I think that it really is that's why people will do it. Otherwise, I'm like, I'm going to rest, but I'm sitting back and doing what I need to do, and I'm going to stay secure. Because we always forget, one of the people I've had the privilege of studying for a while is Ed Catmull at Pixar. He's the one who talked to me about just how hard it is when you're really trying to do something new, and how hard it is to find friends when you're doing something new. Now, everyone who watches your show may say, I like the new, I'm looking for disruption. But when people go back to ask us to disrupt, we're all kind of human. We wonder really why. And so if it doesn't matter, why am I doing it? I'm not going to take the effort. The other thing is there are generational differences, and we do research on, what does talent want around the world? And it turns out no matter what country you go to, people want to know they're working for an organization that will develop them, that will put them in a position to have impact on a purpose they really care about. It doesn't matter where they are in the world, particularly if they're sort of Gen Z or early millennials. So I think that if you can't speak that, then people don't want to work with you. The most talented people, they don't want to have any parts of that company. And actually, company reputation looks like it's becoming ever more important. And people are embarrassed to work at certain companies, right? So
exactly.
Yeah, you can't pay them. It's interesting. I think we have to get out of this mindset. If you pay them enough, they'll stay. No, they may stay, but their brains and their hearts won't be there. And if you're trying to innovate and stay ahead of the curve, they're not engaged enough to do that for you.
Engaged. Yeah, they're not going to be engaged. Hey, now one of these interesting companies we were talking about earlier before we got up was a company I was doing something with avatars and something that you and I expected out in Japan. Want to share a little bit about that? So if you can.
Yeah, so one of the things, our new book is really about how you scale innovation and take on really big challenges and opportunities. And so one of the organizations that I happened to run across because I was doing some work in Japan was an organization called Avatar Inn, a company. And Avatar In is an organization where they're going to teleport our consciousness. They discovered we can't teleport our mass for probably about 90 years. But these two engineers who were working in ANA out by the airport had this idea that why can't we democratize resources? It's a mobility problem. We need to do it without putting roads and things in place. So they began to talk about it. They actually made their way to see the CEO of ANA and described to him, if you can imagine, we're thinking of going into the teleportation business. Would ANA like to do that? But it's going to be consciousness, not mass, because we've talked to the quantum physicists. And the CEO said, I'm very intrigued. You mean like Star Trek? And they now exist. They have actually, their MVP is up right now. There's a launch if you go to Avatar In. Got to know a little Japanese to register. They're actually providing summer camps. And what it is it's really basically, they want to build based on the fact that ANA knows logistics. They know global logistics, right? This is the capability. They're going to build a global internet that is mobile, real-time, and secure, so that we can send over our essence, we can have an avatar of ourselves to go do whatever we want to do if, in fact, that company, that business, that country has access to one of these new me robots that will allow you to send your avatar over. So I encourage all of you to go and look this up. But this is because, going back to framing, ANA is an airline? No, we're in the mobility business.
Yep.
So why shouldn't we do this? And they've put millions and millions, at least $25 million into this already. They've been working with X Prize. They've been working with JAXA, which is the Japanese space station. They have one of their avatars up on the International Space Station. They have them in hospitals. Grandparents are calling and saying, I can't see my grandchild. Can I have access to one of your robots? Children get it right away. It's so easy. So I think that this is the next phase, next kind of mobility, where we just they're doing it. In fact, as you might imagine, part of it is, can you get expertise of a doctor or something to a village or to, frankly, a poor community in a city in a very well-to-do country? So but they're driven by purpose. Let's just be real clear in the choices. So what they told me the other day is, everybody wants us to go 5G, 6G, 7G, 8G. No, we need to do it 2G. If we don't do it on 2G,
it won't be
everybody in the world won't have access to it. So it's back to access. So they are using the X Prize to try to get people to focus on developing the kinds of technologies that are for 2G that we actually can therefore make this really a democratic kind of way of getting access to these general purpose avatars. Now, it turns out, and one of the things that I do want to mention here is that many businesses that are trying to take on these big problems or opportunities have to work with government. So the other piece that we all need to do, I think leaders are seeing, even always have to partner. You don't have all the capabilities. So going back to that horizontal, you've got to map out who are the partners we need to have to take this on. And for a lot of what we're looking at, without government, whatever it is, you actually can't get this stuff done. And being more proactive and trying to work with government, not in an inappropriate way, to set the stage for certain new technologies to really be, again, secure.
Ecosystems are the future, absolutely.
Right. So that's the other thing you need. You need leaders that can work across the sectors and know how to be those bridgers and translators across.
Got it. Public-private partnerships, cross-industry partnerships, and more importantly, trying to get more people engaged. So we're here with Linda Hill, co-founder of Paradox Strategies and Harvard Business School professor. Thank you so much for sharing your insights today. You can follow the company Twitter handle at Paradox Strategy. Thank you so much for being on the show, and we'll catch up on the green room.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hey, thank you.
My pleasure.
Wow, Diane, it's super fast. We're done in an hour. It feels like we've gone through 10 minutes. So any thoughts, observations on your end?
Well, I mean, we're on the cusp of, I think, another big revolution in so many different ways. So, transportation and, the cloud maturity, and I think, leadership is changing so much. It's a very exciting time for those that are ready to make those shifts. And I think all of us have to get ready for a very different world in the next couple of years.
Well, it's going to be crazy if you're here on Fridays, 11 p.m., 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. You're going to have next week, episode 244, Fred Brown, consultant at Deloitte, David Seftel, Chief Medical Officer and CEO of Enable Biosciences, and of course, Tracy Zimmerman back, President and CEO of Robots and Pencils. So thank you all for following here. Happy Friday. Diane, thank you for being here on the show with us. And of course, thank you to our awesome guests. All right. Thank you.